Pledge of Allegiance and we'll get the meeting started.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:35. And we are recording. So, with apologies for my squeaky shoes, as Mike knows, we're all squeaking around tonight. Hey, Bob. So, the first item on the agenda actually is Mike Wernicke from the Pioneer Valley Railroad, and I believe you wanted to come and talk to us about the situation with respect to the railroad property, the right-of-way that goes through the town.
Procedurally, the way we normally do this is here,
If you wouldn't mind at the microphone, then other folks can hear you better. You'll find that the acoustics in this room are a little tough. We're working on that.
my shoes squeak also.
Well, squeaky shoes.
Basically, why I suggested we get back together again, we were having a dialogue with the town of Southampton back in the latter part of 2009.
Right.
And I think we all ran into the economic malady that we all felt there, and everyone sort of backed away from it with good reason. Now I think we've just become numb to the economic reality. But I did notice what prompted my attention recently was there was a segment of another line, a bicycle path that came into your community. And I inquired through Reggie. It was just something of interest to the town. And as she indicated it was, I thought it would be an opportune moment to look at it. The Pioneer Valley Railroad owns this line. The line used to go all the way to Northampton. In fact, years back it went all the way to Shelburne Falls and Miller's Falls. The part that we had owned, we sold the East Hampton portion in 1998, which has, as many of you are aware, has become a bicycle path. This line is still classed as it's an active line that has not been abandoned. It is not in use at the moment. We could put it back in use, but to put it in use requires a business, a level of business, which there is very few up here. There are a couple of parcels in your town that I believe are still classified as industrial. Some of the property south of Valley Road and
Right.
the area around Marmon, Keystone, and the like. But by and large, your community has gone more into a residential setting, and there's less need for our rail service. Quite the opposite down where we do operate in Westfield and throughout wholly of our business has grown dramatically over the last couple of years as the rail industry has throughout the United States. It's extremely robust and really running counter to what the economy is doing for a variety of economic and environmental reasons. The railroads have gone through quite a renaissance. My inquiry, I think, to begin the conversation is probably the question of what are the interests of the town? Is this something that the town of Southampton is interested in doing at this juncture? And we can pick up where we left off. I think we both had appraisers looking at the property, and numbers had been concluded on their part, and they were a bit apart. I don't think we ever discussed that. And we also recognize there's been pros and cons within your community of those who like it and don't like bike paths, and it's really something we can't control as a railroad, but it's something your constituents do. I think the bottom line portion of it is the railroad is interested in selling a line if that is something that the town is interested in. There are other influences on it. Both Congressman Neal and Congressman Oliver have been very supportive of bicycle paths and recreational entities in the state. And we obviously communicate with them. We're very much connected to the community. Railroad's been here since 1982, so we're nothing new. We're coming up on our 30th anniversary here next year. And we typically try to work with all facets of that to primarily provide the services that we do, but likewise to be a good neighbor and participate in whatever way we can. So I think the first question I would have is this something that we jointly care about pursuing? Should we look at that? and communicate it. The other question I would have is, Mr. Chairman, is this the proper forum to discuss where we left off in the pricing of it? I could review that for those present if you feel it's an appropriate time, or we can do it another time.
Okay, so in answer to your questions, the first one is, as some of you I think are aware, we completed a feasibility study, and Bob Barton, who's here, and Mike Bueller also were very involved in that, and that was presented in August, if I remember right.
Yeah, July, August,
The
somewhere.
warmer months.
Warmer months, yeah.
Warmer months, and that preliminary feasibility study is actually available if you care to take a look at it down at the library. There's some copies of it there. And my understanding is that the wishes of the town are to continue forward with this project to see where it may go. Obviously, understanding that it's ultimately up to the town to decide to complete it or not. But nonetheless, the feasibility study has been done, and that certainly is available. With respect to your second question, I think it would be most appropriate, given that the last appraisal was done in 2009, would be to consider a more recent, up-to-date sort of appraisal. And generally what we do on these, when we're discussing dollar amounts like this, is we typically discuss them amongst ourselves and then have an open meeting to discuss the final amounts. So I think we would be a little bit hasty, I think, if we got into that at this point. That said, though, there was some question whether or not this would be, if we were to purchase it, would be a purchase in fee simple or some sort of lease arrangement or something like that, and does the railroad retain the right in any way to take it back?
But typically there are a couple of items involved in it that are, again, quite typical in rail sales, or the sale of the land. It is a title transfer. The exact definition I'll leave to the attorney, but we do not have no interest in leasing it. We want to outright sell it. Mm-hmm. There are complexities ahead of that. We are federally regulated. We need to officially abandon the property in the eyes of the Surface Transportation Board. In the state of Massachusetts, we then need to offer it to the Department of Transportation, who most likely will say they have no use for it and they will allow us to sell it. They do have right of first refusal, but I work very closely with them in various groups, and I highly doubt that they would have much usage there. Many of the properties, and one of our considerations here is that we would typically retain an easement right, or there will be an easement on it. There may already be on parts of it from previous for utility usage. One of the unique parts of railroad property, and it causes some confusion in how it's priced, is a concept that's referred to as assemblage. And effectively, we're looking at a contiguous, narrow piece of property, which effectively was a railroad line. And in order to duplicate that in real estate setting, one needs to assemble a variety of pieces from other properties, which can be both very difficult to do, in many cases impossible to do, but also be very costly, as various parties may agree or disagree to sell key parcels. We were in the middle of this, again, 2 years ago. The Pioneer Valley Energy Center is still a project alive in Westfield. They were looking to put their gas line from the city of Westfield up to the industrial park where they're proposed to build. Their option was, I believe it was 15 or 16 different property owners to run the gas line through a route outside, or a single owner of running it up our rail line. And the cost differential was quite noticeable. And again, that's a typical advantage of what rail lines do, is especially for utilities. If you notice, you'll see many power lines or gas lines running concurrent. It's all regulated on what depth they have to be and so forth. But typically we will sell a property with the rights to put those on, or they already have them, and that's rather common. The one other part of the routine...
Excuse me, you said with the rights, or you retain the rights?
We will retain the rights. The railroad will retain the rights for an easement, or one will be already in place at sale. And again, a common event. The third item that falls into it is we need effectively the steel parts. Our interest is the rail that's sitting here right now is though it's 100 years old, is infinitely reusable. And we're not scrapping it, we will put it on in other locations on our railroad. And what is typically done, and the same thing was done in East Hampton, and many of the paths, Southampton was the same way, is we will remove all the steel from the property, which we will again effectively recycle onto our existing railroad, and what is left is the remnants of the tie structure, which in this case is mostly dust. But that is typically part of the construction of rail paths or recreational paths, where the contractor comes in, removes the remnants of the ties, which may or may not have some creosote left in them, and disposes of them properly. And the steel is typically gone from it.
So another question that would arise from that, Mike, then would be, obviously the creosote, and you may have looked at this in the feasibility study with respect to the environmental considerations and getting clearance or a clean bill of health from it. What was your finding on that, Bob?
Certainly, in the study, one of the dollars and cents that we looked at is that if the steel remained, the cost of disposing of the ties would be offset by the sale of the steel, essentially. As far as the environmental impact of it, it's more, I forget they call it a phase 1 engineering study or something like that. Where they'd be more looking at documentation of spills or whatever that was on the line, and not so much it didn't sound as though, and I don't think it's addressed specifically in the feasibility study, but it didn't sound as though the creosote leaching out of the ties was really a significant consideration, or considered to be a potential issue down the road, other than disposing of the ties, depending on what's, like I said, so what's left of the ties. Right. To my knowledge, creosote ties are considered hazardous waste.
Typically not, but it depends what state you're in. I don't know for a fact, but probably Massachusetts, since they consider motor oil, it's the only of 2 states in the union that considers motor oil to be a hazardous waste. There's a good chance they do too. The ties that are here are probably, the newest of which are probably 25 years old. They deteriorate, but typically when you take a look at rail property, and you can look at other bicycle paths, the level of contamination left behind is usually negligible. The creosote is basically a coal tar basis, and what a lot of the roadbed is made out of actually is remnants of coal that was cinders were typically dumped as part of the construction process during the steam age. It's rather irregular to have any other environmental issues from that alone. Spillage would require, there may or may not have been a great derailment somewhere and something that could spill. Obviously, the phase 1 environmental study would indicate that. I do not have any direct knowledge that anything had occurred to any great catastrophic event in our ownership. The ownership again goes back to effectively 1870. And that's one of the problems in researching railroads. There's a lot of history. Some of the maps I provided for you are our 1915 valuation maps, which are survey maps, very detailed. But those are fairly recent. A lot of this goes back when this was built. It was actually started in 1857. But generally, the ties are left there. That's part of the disposal. They do have to go to a hazmat disposal site. But when we look at this line, what is left of them, it is not a huge degree of tonnage. And that is part of the cost, generally, of building a bike path.
Okay. So just for point of further information then, Mike, we are actually in the process now of forming and naming a new committee, which is a continuation, next phase of the feasibility study for this, what we call the Greenway. And the deadline for self-nomination for that is October 18th. So your timing is very good in that sense. So I would think, and are there any questions for Mr. Renneke while he's here?
Not so much, at least at first, for Mr. Renneke, but for the board, is this something that the committee, as it sits now, until after the 18th, we can start working with Mr. Renneke and his acquisition direction.
Well, on the presumption that the feasibility committee was formally disbanded by vote, I frankly don't know if we did that. I was absent one meeting. Do you remember, Bob?
As I remember, we disbanded that committee and
The new one.
created a new one.
Did we?
with The current number, to change the name. I
Right.
think, more so.
That's,
Well, it's a committee of 7 members, and we also wanted the opportunity for folks to self-nominate for the new committee.
Right.
So I think we have 3 or 4 names in there now, but the cutoff date for that is the 18th of October. So at which point we would then formally empower that committee to start acting. So first couple of weeks. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think it's like I was also on the feasibility committee. Have we had railroads sold other segments to other municipalities, or was it just a East Hampton sale?
We have here and elsewhere. East Hampton is, we sold that in 1998, and you all know what that looks like today. We also sold, and it hasn't been developed, but we sold everything from the Southwick line, or possibly a little north of that, to the Westfield River, to the city of Westfield. Now, due to our relationship as one of the cities we service, that was appraised at a certain value. Part of it the city paid us in cash, part of it we donated. And that was the desire of the president of the company at that time. And that also fits into our justification where our pricing should be. But our other rail lines, I believe Florida has, we've got several railroads in Florida, they have also sold lines, so this is nothing new to us. And there is somewhat of a precedent that has been set on some lines. Some lines were sold by railroads who were in a desperation phase, especially those sold in the 80s, 90s, early 90s. The railroad industry was in very tough shape, trying to rehab itself after it was deregulated. Some of those have very depressed pricing and just really don't fit today's equation. The growth of the recreational industry, especially in this area, has been significant. So we see a lot more of it. And in fact, one of my predecessors, Craig Della Pena, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, had my job at one point on the railroad. So he probably had himself a little conflicted there at one time or another, but quite avid in his passion for bicycle paths.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I wonder, did you plan on a sale of a partial border to border? My earlier belief, which may have been wrong, was that the park for sale was only going to be that north of the section of Route 10.
Originally, that was the discussion. We extended it further in our discussions in '09, which may or may not be of interest to you. We can truncate it at any point. The problem with terminating it there, you're all familiar with what the highway looks like at that point. That's a very poor place to put bicycles in. There's hills on both sides, and it's very narrow. After thinking about it further, and again, this is not our decision, we'll sell it in any manner, is to go down further. My preference was somewhere near Valley Road, which then, though it is a little hilly, to bring it back out to Route 10 and see down. Part of the question of the whole thing is how to join all these together, and my railroad's still going to be in the middle, and it somehow it has to get around it via public roads, because it's impossible, even if we put it next to the railroad with a nice fence. The rights-of-way are too narrow. They go through some very wet areas. It would just not be feasible to run it all the way through there.
So that's been thought of.
Right. Well, I've thought of it. Let's put it that way. I'm sure others in the city, and there's another big question in Secretary Sullivan, who had been our mayor in Westfield for a number of years, is involved in this to a degree, and his thoughts is how they get from where it terminates in Westfield, which would be effectively at the river, how you get across the 2 new bridges and get through the center of town, and those are still sort of hanging out in question, which we all have ideas about, but no firm solutions. But my own thought was to bring it down further into our property down around Valley Road, but that's entirely up to the desire of the town. We're interested in selling any and all part of it, with the exception of Valley Road South. There is some potential, though I don't think it's a high potential, of future rail use there. There is some industrial land that may or may not become of value There's a lot of activity throughout the Northeast down there right now.
Good question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
From what I understand, East Hampton bought their track of the railroad. However, the railroad still retains rights to it.
I don't know for a fact if we retained it on that particular property. We have on others, and again, that's something we desire on this, because we have been in discussion with certain utilities about it that have requested to deal with us on that while we're all in ownership. And their interest is simplicity, because it's being a rail line, being this contiguous piece of land, which is sort of rare, is much easier to work than if they would have to go out in the future. These are forward-looking easements to bring either gas or electric line into these various communities, not for our needs immediately today, but what they forecast what our energy needs are going to be in the future. If you look at, again, going back to the Southwick property, the same was done there. We didn't own that piece down in Southwick, but that has a gas line running through it, and I believe a sewer line, which is a perfect place for it. The nice part about railroads and why they make such nice bicycle paths is that they're effectively level. They're very minimal grade, because trains don't go up hills very well. And if you look at the gradient on this, it's easy to work with. Relatively, it's probably averages 50 feet in width. That's something that others have interest in as well as the recreational side.
Yes, Mr. Bueller?
If I can ask this clearly, just sort of following up on the manager's question, how do the rights inherent, what happens when the rights inherent in that easement bump up against the realities of freeway construction? And if there will be, not with some years from now, there will be a Southampton Greenway, which will be a certain way with a certain surface and certain amenities. What happens when those bump up against the needs of the gas line?
I don't feel capable to myself to answer the question. That is one of the questions our dear friends in the law departments or lawyers tend to answer better. I wouldn't hazard the guess of what happens with it. There's obviously the question of what happens when you go through and you disrupt something that's there. Whose responsibility is to put it back in the state that we wanted it. And how all that is written into the contractual language is beyond my scope of understanding.
Just one quick follow-up, and again, maybe outside your, but typically, in arrangements like this, are towns or municipalities expected to design a greenway with an eye toward that potential future use, or is that not a constraint?
Generally not. Part of the reason I provided the valuation plan, mapping of the property, most of these properties are much wider than what bicycle paths ever turn out to be. They're generally 50 feet or better in width. And generally the bike path is 10 feet, 12 feet. So they, again, from my experience of just riding in Southwick and down in Connecticut, where there are also gas lines running by there, you usually see them off beside the property, not in the middle of the nicely paved or stoned or whatever your concept is of what you want to put as a riding surface. But those are, again, part of a negotiation and an agreement that the legal folks are going to get involved in, and they would probably answer better than I.
Thank you. Bob, you had your hand up.
Appraisal-wise, going back to your mention of the appraisal, it seems to make sense to me to readdress that. Would we want to, maybe between the town and the railroad, agree on one appraiser rather than two separate appraisers?
Absolutely, yes, right. And further, we'd also need to agree on exactly what is being appraised, because we do have some different numbers here, of course, in your letter to us. So we would need to agree on that, what that width is, and to the extent that we could, even talk to Mike Bueller's question about what would happen in the future and the exact width that's being sold. Because for us, as I'm sure you can see, there's also a certain advantage to owning more right-of-way for other multi-use or things like that. So those all fit into a larger picture.
Part of our thought process in '09 was to have the two appraisers look at it, but they came at it from very different directions. The concept of assemblage is unique to railroads. It's also unique to utilities where they may have a power line ownership which looks similar to a railroad, and they sell that or they sell rights on it. It has a valuation method that's totally different than over the fence or similar sales of industrial or residential property, which doesn't necessarily apply. I mean, we could make a case that residential property, due to our economics that we're living in today, are different than they were X number of years ago. Or we can inflate what 1998 looked like going forward. But the harder reality is to mesh those various methods of measurement together. When we looked at the two appraisals, I think there were some valid arguments to come out somewhere different than the two ends of it. We have numbers, if we took it purely as an inflationary one, we'd get a very, very high number when we relate it to what happened 12 years ago in Southampton. That's inflation rate's been somewhere north of 30% during that time frame. What it would do to that pricing versus what the price of a residential lot is today. But I think either a singular group, if we could agree on one, or a meeting of the minds or a discussion, negotiation, dialogue, whatever we shall term it, to come to that price arrangement. I mean, we're not stuck on any firm number. We have a number in mind, and I've shared it with the board. But it's, we want to be cooperative as we are with most of our neighbors. And it's something we can make work. Our intention is to go more in that direction than to see how stubborn we can be.
There's another dimension that's to which I'm sure you're aware, to the towns in general, when they purchase properties, are bound by the appraised value. They can't pay more than that. So your notion of who the appraiser is and what is being appraised becomes much more important in a case like this, too.
Yeah, we recognize that, and part of our conversation, again, which ended prematurely, I think, was that the appraisal of the townsperson used a method we don't agree with in there. We should have had a conversation, probably a three-party or four-party conversation with the two appraisers, the town and the railroad, to possibly look at the alternatives of that methodology. That never occurred. We ceased our activities at that point before we got there.
Right, and our preference would be to see something that's legally defensible from the beginning, which would include town council, to make sure that we're conforming to Mass General laws with respect to what
Right.
towns can and cannot do.
We are very much aware, very sensitive to the particulars of your requirements of the municipality and what you need to do, and to have everything totally divulged and justifiable. So certainly work in any manner to meet your legal demands.
All right, great. Well, we certainly appreciate your time. Is there anything further from Mr. Renicky then? Okay, so again, our committee will be up and running as of October the 18th, and we have your contact information, so I think it's fair to assume that our committee will be in touch with you and your folks over there. We certainly appreciate you coming out this evening.
I will leave a couple of my business cards.
Right, one here and one, just leave them here and we'll distribute them.
That's my little letter.
Your shoes stopped squeaking, mine is still squeaking, so.
We'll see you as they sneak out the door.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much, Mike.
Thank you for coming, sir. Appreciate it very much.
So there's some cards up here for anybody who may want them. Okay. The next item then is David Keelson, Town Accountant, fiscal year 11 closing. Thank you, Michael. And I spoke with Mr. Keelson today, and he and I concluded that the best path for him would be to not come this evening and explain what's going on, because he's very busy trying to get it closed. So there is that alternative sometimes, when you're in the middle of a hurricane, sometimes to stop and measure the wind or something. Further, he did say that he was at a meeting this morning that was attended by a guy named Phil Boudreau, who is the Department of Revenue, or DOR representative, based in Springfield, who looks after 31 towns out here in western Massachusetts. Only 4 have submitted their year-end closings so far. So what would appear to be going on is that this, for whatever reasons that are beyond me, cherry sheets or peach sheets, or maybe you understand them, Michael, but
What?
municipal accounting.
Oh.
Only 4 towns, anyway, out of the 31 that he looks after, have been able to submit their year-end closings so far.
So you're saying we're in good company?
We're in good company, and it seems to be a tough year with a lot of complicated paperwork. But Mr. Kielsen did say that he has every intention of and doesn't see why he cannot have this ready in this meeting, the year-end books for the October 18th meeting, additional 2 weeks. So that's where we are with respect to year-end closing. Comments, questions? Okay, Tom Cohan, Charter Communications review and possibly signed contract. There were a couple of things going on. They missed this, but yeah. Welcome to the Finance Committee. Were you here to hear David Kielsen's comments?
We were here to talk about that subject. I didn't realize there was comments.
Well, his comments were, I talked to him on the phone today, that he's not ready. He does anticipate being ready for the next meeting, October the 18th, but he just hasn't finished yet.
Ready for what?
You didn't have the books closed.
Are we going to get any expense or revenue reports for this year?
I mean, we're at the meeting, and we're going over the agenda, and we can't do anything.
I understand, that's right. So, he said he would have everything done by the 18th. So, do you need anything in the interim that I can ask him for, or we can ask him for?
We will not report it in the water.
Okay.
Finance committee can't operate.
All right.
I guess
He
that's-
relayed to me that out of the 31 towns that Phil Boudreau looks after, only 4 have submitted their reports to DOR so far. So there's something going on this year that is really adding to the town accountant's burdens. So specifically what that is, I don't know.
I think that's an assumption we're making. We don't have the monthly reports, we don't even have monthly reports as good as we can get, we got nothing.
Are you talking about monthly reports, or are you talking about the resolution of last fiscal year?
The resolution of fiscal year.
Okay.
So you're
But
looking for
The
monthly.
other issue that we're,
Okay.
the immediate issue for
All right.
us is that, we're a quarter of the year, a quarter of the way through the fiscal year right now, July, August, and September, and we haven't received any monthly reports for July or August or September. So it's very hard to know who's spending how much money in their budget, who's already looking like they might be getting into some trouble, so that we can actually start to be proactive about it.
Sure.
But with no reports on this current fiscal year, we're in the dark.
Okay.
We're getting requests for money from the reserve account, and we're tabling everything because we don't have a clue. And I talked to David 2 weeks ago, and he said he'd have everything ready by the mid-September. And we talked to Donna Whiteley because she was part of some of the reports that were missing, and she assured us that she was pretty much going to be able to pay a couple weeks ago. So,
Okay. She's off $40,000 today when she tried to close. And additionally, they received an accounts payable from the school yesterday from fiscal year 11. So that's what's going on. From the department level, at the treasurer's level, she's off, but she's working on it too. So
do we have a plan of attack if we don't get the reports by mid-October?
we could fire everybody except for the treasurer. But honestly, I don't.
Do we need to vote on that, or?
No, John, I'm honestly, as you know, what really could we do, seriously?
No, seriously, I mean, do we need to get an outside accountant to help out here?
No. What we're going to be taking a look at here is, given that we have a new treasurer and some changes and things like that, do we need to have some difference in the structure of how we get these reports? Because we understand, the importance to you, obviously, in your committee of moving this forward. So,
I mean, to you folks, really.
absolutely, correct. So we're getting into,
My understanding, and, I don't know if it's true or not, these reports are fairly canned, and it's a matter of inputting certain expenditures into the report, and then at the end of the month, use the expression, push a button and the report will come out. He has an assistant. Has she been asked if she could help out on this right now?
I'll check into that, I'm not sure on that level.
I mean, we don't have to read reports from scratch every time. It's not a $0 based on one report.
So when was the last one that you received? Would it have been fiscal year 10, the July closing?
We haven't got the close yet.
Last fiscal.
Obviously, we got month to month in fiscal 11, but we don't have the closing. And the closing affects all the months after it. So, it's a domino effect.
Right. Okay, so you'd need a closing for fiscal year 11, which again, he's told me that he'll have by the 18th, and you also need some interim monthlies.
Well, again, the interim monthlies would be good, but they're better after the closing because we know what's rolling forward.
True. Okay, yeah, and we are looking at the structural thing that's going on too. Again, so part of it is, as you know, we have a new people.
Budgets and all that, again, we're not even starting because we have all this stuff.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other ideas or comments on All right, so back to Charter Communications. We had a situation, an issue, if you will, where there was a utility pole on some property off of Jonathan Judd Circle and Coleman Road there. That was one of these situations that the Charter had some ideas about how they could dispose of that in exchange for some payments. And all of that has been resolved at no cost to the customer or the town, or the potential customer, I should say. And I think hats off to Ed Cawley for doing that and getting all this to happen with respect to the location of the pole. And the property owner ended up actually installing a subsurface conduit through which Charter is going to put some of their coaxial cable to serve residents of Jonathan Judd Circle. So it was one of those rare win-win situations. So that basically freed us up to consider signing the Charter contract, because that was the one pending item, with the exception being that's 13.6, I believe, in the contract, which has to do with Charter installing the cables, a Wi-Fi and a coaxial cable, two coming into this building, which would permit us to then go live as opposed to being taped, recorded. So, that said, it's before the board right now. Do we actually want to go ahead and sign this Charter contract for 5-year that we had agreed on, subject to those two elements? And one possibility would be we could then let our town council, Bill Huey, know that we have this, and upon receipt from Charter of a letter stating if they will indeed install those cables, they can have the contract. And given all that, Mr. Cohan, who is the Vice President for Government Relations at Charter, elected to not come this evening. Similarly, we disinvited Bill Huey to save council money, because we didn't really need him to be here. But Reggie has been talking with him via phone, and that's where we are with respect to the Charter contract. So if the board chooses to sign at this point, we would need a motion to that effect.
As far as the cable that comes here, didn't I see that covered in an earlier memo, that it was part of this contract? That
it is. Chapter
So-
13.6, I
Yeah,
think.
that's what I'm thinking, that it says it's going to be the drop. And I don't understand, what was your concern with that?
The only concern was there was some concern over whether or not there was any fee associated with the actual installation of that or not.
At its sole cost. The licensee shall provide at its sole cost an expense, one modular. The only question is, do we have one already, and is that how they're going to, do we have
Tom Cohen told me that there are two cables coming in. One is Wi-Fi and one is coax. Does that sound reasonable? I honestly don't know the difference.
That's what expense. One modular and one processor to the town to ensure PEG access program can be transmitted. Do we have that in the other building? Is that the problem?
I don't know that. Do you know
We
that?
can't sign it.
If we have a processor
Do we have an old processor in the old building, and that's why they won't bring it over here?
I believe so.
So that's, the question is whether one is really that one or bringing it to the new building.
He told me he's putting in two
And it says one. It's sole cost and expense, one modular and one.
and one, isn't that two?
I
One
don't
plus
know,
one?
that's beyond my technical knowledge, but
Mine too, so.
to ensure the PEG access, I'm thinking they think it's over there and we've got our one. So until that's resolved, I'd say no. If that resolved it, then yes, I could vote for it, but if that one, if there's any doubt whether that one is one for here or the one that's already in existence over there.
Why don't we hold out until we find out?
Right. Shall construct a fiber drop and utilize the
Oh, there's
existing.
210,000 College Highway.
Yeah,
To
And
the new,
there's-
yeah, so there it is.
yeah, so it seems to be there.
Seems to be there.
So again, my proposal is we could deliver this to Bill Huey, signed upon the receipt of.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, see that.
Fiber drop and utilize existing transmitter receiver install.
So that's a physical piece of equipment.
That's over there. I think we need clarification.
Okay.
Which they're going to use here.
Well, for purposes of access programming, but I don't know that, and it's beyond my technical skill, and if it's beyond my technical skill, I'd like somebody to explain it to me. Because we've been talking about $8,000 or something to bring that over here. 6.
Well,
Can we, I'll make a motion that we table this until we find clarification on 13.6, whether it includes a new drop in this building and all the equipment necessary.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so we table this, but is there an action step that's associated with that?
Yeah, until we find out whether or not 13.6 includes all the equipment necessary to drop it here.
But do we want to empower somebody to contact?
I would ask Reggie.
Okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, we're on to the next thing. Okay. I'm still trying to figure out all those terms myself. Open time for the public. Mr. Abisham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 brief points. The first is some feedback on the expanded hours for the library, which began just after Labor Day. There had been concern, you might have saw the nice article in the Gazette that discusses this, but when I first came to town, one of the first things that I learned was that there was a desire to align the hours of the library with Town Hall, because we had the situation where the Town Hall was open on Monday and the library was open on Friday and closed opposite. And so my initial proposal was simply to have the same hours as Town Hall, plus our evening hours, which we're required to do by the state. The trustees were unhappy with that because they wanted some time on Friday, and we had good feedback from patrons, so we are open now on Mondays and 3 hours on Friday, and the response has been phenomenal. The very first Monday we were open, our the number of patrons coming in was the same as a regular Wednesday, and that was with very little advertisement, so people were hungry for it, and I've not had any complaints about the shorter hours on Friday. Everyone understands that we had to have some trade-off, and people are happy. So that really marks, in my short time so far here in Southampton, 2 really good steps forward for the library. One, the installation of ADA accessible doors to the library, both of which were installed the first week of July, right after the money had been reallocated at town meeting. And the second was a really healthy process of dialoguing with the town to restructure the hours and meet everyone's concern that good. So I thank the town for that. The second piece of business that I have is to submit my resignation to the select board for my tenure here in Southampton. So I have a single letter which I'll give to the chairman, and copies can be made. The Board of Trustees has been notified this week. The trustees will meet Thursday evening to discuss steps. In my letter, I have made it clear that I will be staying on for 2 months to afford the Board of Trustees ample opportunity to find a successor. I hope that they can do it in that period of time. I think there are several options that they should consider. But my primary objective in that is to make the transition as easy as possible for everyone involved, particularly the staff and the patrons. Are there any questions from any of you that I can answer?
I'd like to, if I may, and I don't mean to be out of line. If I am, just say I'd rather not answer that question. Are you leaving upon your own free will, or have you been pushed by people to...
No, this is 100% of my own free will. The response from the trustees, everyone has asked me to stay on. There has been I have talked to half of the trustees so far this week, and all of them have requested that I not go.
Okay, I don't know how to ask the next question.
Why must it?
Why are you going? As far as I know, everybody in town is happy. And when you told me the parking lot you were going, I was totally floored. I said, what is going on here? It looked like a perfect marriage. Are you at liberty to say why you're leaving?
I won't speak to that entirely. It was not a perfect marriage. I think what the Board of Trustees was looking for in a new director, they got in me. And then they decided that that's not what their vision for the library was. We had a very important discussion at the September meeting because there were some trustees, the trustees are bound by a handbook published by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners that sets out what the responsibilities and obligations are of trustees, just as you all have obligations and responsibilities in your office as select men or select women. That's consistent through all the municipalities in the Commonwealth. So too do trustees. And there are some inconsistencies in the way that some trustees in Southampton execute their office. And I was made aware that this is not a new issue, that previous directors have addressed this with some trustees. I engaged in a conversation with trustees about how to, completely in line with the handbook. This is what the handbook says, this is how I interpret it, can we have a discussion? And as one trustee said, the handbook is nice, but we're not going to follow it to the letter in Southampton. So that puts me in a very difficult position as your director, because in order for me to execute my office, I need to be able to work clearly with the Board of Trustees.
I don't know what to say at this point. What I think I'm getting out of this conversation is the Board of Trustees is not acting accordingly according to the handbook, and they're running it the way they want, and they're not supposed to do that. Should it be time for the Select Board to sit down with these people? Because we cannot lose good directors.
I do hope that one of you, in the past I have applied for, well, even, last spring, I was interviewing with other towns, to be their library director, and often the case, though not universally, a member of the Select Board is a member of the search committee. I know you all serve on multiple boards, and I don't wish to put another on you. I would encourage this board to be part of at least the dialogue in terms of what the town is looking for or how this marriage is going to happen, if not be part of the search committee itself. I guess I have, in terms of structurally with the town, I have two concerns. One is a funding one. The library is not in a funding crisis. The library needs to operate on a very reasonable budget more efficiently. That was very clear within a month of my time there. I don't recommend that you cut their funding, but there needs to be a higher expectation that more is done, not with less, but what they have, because it's a very reasonable budget for what's ahead. And I tire of hearing, we have no money, we have no money. There is money, but there is an accountability that needs to be there. The other thing that I would draw to your attention is that the five of you are able to govern the town. I don't understand why there needs to be a board of 12 to oversee the library. I know of no other board in town that has 12 members on it. And that makes it difficult to secure a quorum. That makes it difficult to get any business done. That is a very weighty process to undertake that I'm sure needs to go to town meeting and potentially a revision of the bylaws. I don't know. I do know one of your previous directors, Sarah Woodbury, who's now in Deerfield, is engaged in the same process in Deerfield, downsizing their board of trustees as well. So I'm not the only person that has walked away from this with the same observation. So those are the two concerns that I would put before you as the library moves forward. I will also recommend to the trustees Thursday night that they not rush. I know that there's a desire to fill the position. I would even recommend a temporary director perhaps be brought on board for a trial period of 6 months. I think the Board of Trustees needs to really think about what it is that they want, what direction they want for the library, before they just bring somebody else on and then go through this quick transition again. I like Southampton. I really like working with this board and the other boards that I work with. It's sad for me to move on, but it's the right decision for myself and my family. And when I was asked to go elsewhere a few weeks ago, I was quick to say yes because of the reasons that I've discussed with you.
Well, this is really unexpected, and we're sorry to have to go. It was a pretty short tenure. Would there have been any, could we have been of help earlier if we had known, we had no idea? I had no idea. Did anybody have any idea that there was something?
I don't think so. Because of this very particular structure where I report to the Board of Trustees and only have the sort of, I don't really understand the line of communication. I don't know of any other department head that reports to a Board of Trustees before the Select Board. The police chief doesn't, the fire chief doesn't, the highway superintendent doesn't. They all report to you, is my understanding. I think that's something that needs to be re-examined, in terms of that accountability. And I give credit to the trustees because they have worked hard as well. This is not a matter of a personality clash or a petty indifference. This is a fundamental differing of vision. I was hired, and in the process of that hiring process, I understood my mandate to be one thing, which I have done through paying careful attention to the budget by installing automatic doors, but thinking forward, developing a strategic plan. The trustees have come back saying that they want a different direction. That's fine, we're grown-ups. It's kind of like dating. We've been dating for 6 months, and at the end of the 6 months, I don't want to keep going.
I have a question for you, sir. Would you, I always ask questions, boom, right to you. Would you consider staying if the Select Board and the Board of Trustees and you had a meeting to try to resolve some problems? Because I've heard things on both sides, okay? And there's always two sides to every story, and I always like listening to both of them. I, for one, as a Board of Selectmen member, think we owe it to the town and to you to have a meeting with the Board of Trustees and this gentleman and go over everything and see if there is any, see if we can straighten out any differences. If a party's doing something wrong, whomever it may be, let's make some wise decisions that are going to help the library in all the future years and all our kids. I don't think we should allow any board, and that means Board of Trustees in this case, simply run wild and do whatever they want. They've got to be answerable to somebody. And that means the public. We're the ones that answer to the public, therefore they've got to answer to us. I really and truly think this thing should not be let go. I honestly think it's in the best interest of the town and all of its citizens to sit down with this gentleman, that Board of Trustees, and the Board of Selectmen and see what the problem is, try to ratify them, and see if there's any way we wish to keep this gentleman or you would stay.
I appreciate that gesture. I've already accepted another position. So I would welcome you to the exit interview. I sincerely do. I believe that will be the first Thursday in November, and I hope one, if not all of you, attend that to hear that exit interview process. But a consequence of that or an outcome won't be my tenure. But as I said, I am staying 2 months. I also will make myself available to train whoever the successor is. I didn't have any training at all. I was thrown into it with no guidance. I had to learn, so I don't wish that on anyone. So I appreciate that gesture very much. Unfortunately, it's beyond the scope of
okay, I just...
The problem with that, Doug, is they're elected.
Right.
So we can suggest, but we can't.
Right, and I'm sure if we saw something wrong and we suggested it to them and we brought it as to why we're suggesting it and blah, 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 I'm sure they'd have the common sense and decent courtesy to adhere to it.
Okay, Jeff, if I may, just on behalf of...
I think he has some input.
Thank you for your answer. But Doug, what you're saying is true. I mean, would you be willing to participate in that meeting, even though it would end up with you staying and being frank and honest about it?
even though it wouldn't result in a staying? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the forum for that will be the exit interview, and I welcome that.
I'm thinking before even that, because you've got 2 months, I mean, we could set that before, and I think Mike said that we don't have any pull because of the elected board.
We don't have any direct authority over them.
Well, I think we do. It's called the budget.
But,
I think we could use.
yeah, and I would normally agree with you there, and I would agree with you now, but the problem is that if we dip their budget any lower than it is, they lose their funding and we shut the library, we get it.
But
So we-
sometimes if there's,
I mean-
if we find out that it's bad and they're not willing to talk to us.
No, oh, no.
or anything, I think the only hammer we have is the budget.
That's the stick, for sure. But
Let me ask you, I mean, there's 12 members. Are there a majority of members that want to do it by vote and a minority that say we're doing what we want, or is it?
Yeah, no, there's only, the issue is only 2.
Okay, so there again, I mean, if we've got 10 people who want to do it right, we've got 2 who are pushing. I think we could.
But it's a disproportional amount of sway, people have different personalities and that's, that is more messy than I want to get involved with.
I wasn't trying to turn it into a mess.
Right.
This is my problem, and I'm going to come right out with it and say it. If this, let's say they are acting inappropriately, okay, with the lack of knowledge I have from it, and I'm very careful to say that, what's to stop them from continuing to do this practice? And then we're going to go after, we're going to go after people like him to come in here, I don't mean to say him, and take the position and do a good job and leave, and then leave again, and leave again. Where the heck are we? So if we've got an inconsistency, we got to straighten it out. And if they don't like it, that's too bad.
And let me be clear, because I know that there was a lot of discussion when I came, and still is, about the salary for this position. I'm compensated at a reasonable rate. My hours were increased, and there was a push to make this position full-time, and that happened before I came, and that's an inappropriate avenue to go. That is not the direction that this town needs to go.
I mean, for full-time?
For full-time, not at this stage. Someday, if there is any talk about increasing salaries there, you need to hire someone at $8 an hour to work the front desk. I mean, increase those hours. You don't need more of a full-time director. There will always be work. 40 hours, 50 hours. That will always happen for the director. That would be the only place to go. There are constructive steps to take, and I welcome them.
And maybe this points out a difficulty or a thing. One alternative is to shrink, either leave the board alone, shrink the board of trustees, or 2, whether we can or we can't, eliminate the board of trustees so the department head reports directly here. And that may not be feasible under the library system, but I don't know.
Well, not with the current funding structure. There are libraries that have that situation, but not the way that it's set up in Southampton.
That's what we need to consider from a global point of view, I think, is the alternatives to rectifying the situation. If one, meet with the trustees, find out if there is, taking your word, but meet with them, to give them their fair share, and then us decide on which course of action we wish to take. A charter change reduces, either eliminates or reduces that board. It does seem phenomenal for the size to have 12. I didn't realize there were 12. I should have just.
We might need to bring the other library director back for a conversation too. Once you leave, you have a lot more freedom to discuss.
Right. Kim, you had your hand up, I think? Did you?
I did, Jen Canary, the treasurer. As a weekly patron, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, my family and I go to the library, and Mr. Aubuchon has been fantastic from day one. He knows my children's names, he knows what interests they have, he knows what kind of books I like. The new book section, I've noticed a huge improvement and interesting, wonderful. I take out too many books nowadays because there's so many wonderful, interesting things. I do. And I'm very sad and disheartened that somebody as wonderful as Mr. Aubuchon is leaving our town. He's been such an asset to our community, and this definitely needs to be resolved. We get somebody new, but hopefully, luckily, if stars align properly, we do get somebody as wonderful and more trained and well-versed as Mr. Aubuchon come in as our next director. There definitely needs to be something. Is there a way to do this? Questions? trustees, are they paid in any way, or is it?
No.
Nothing I'm aware of, no.
And,
Prestige.
And do we have a list of these, of the names?
They're elected officials, but here, I would suggest that we call for a joint meeting at this point in time, because my thought process is that the number of times that we call for an all boards meeting or joint meeting, Mr. Obashan shows up or the director shows up, but we never see the trustees. Maybe we should see whether there's a spirit of cooperation here and request them to come to a meeting to discuss this problem and to broach the issue of the 3 alternatives or 4 alternatives that could come from it.
I'll make that a motion, that you just said that.
Could I just, with what outcome from it? I mean, I'm happy to air everything that's happened, but I also am concerned that the number one feedback that I'm getting from the trustees are board meetings are too long, I give more detail than they want 1 hour tops, and then they want to be done once a month.
See if they'll come in and talk to us to cooperate, because they wouldn't be the first board that did.
Over my departure, or just the library in general? I would hope it would be the library generally, not me in particular.
Library in general.
Okay.
What we're looking for is to play this by the rules, because if we have other professional librarians, I don't know if that's your...
It is.
Okay. Please forgive my ignorance.
That's fine.
So we're going to get somebody else that's a professional that comes in, and they expect to run it by the book, which is just like the Bible. They don't do it, and here we go round and round and round again.
Right.
I got 8 grandchildren that go to that library, and they love it.
Right.
And I think this is baloney. That's a nice word to say, isn't it? And I won't tolerate it. I won't tolerate this again either. So that's why I'm making that a motion, what Mike Phelan just said.
Joint meeting. Request that they come to a joint meeting to discuss the library status.
Okay, so Jeff, if I might intervene here, Director Albushan, then on behalf of the Select Board, I would certainly like to thank you for your service. Again, it's altogether too brief. We also at the same time thank you, and also John and everyone else, for bringing up this idea. To the extent that we have some structural issues serving the town through the library, then we certainly do need to use this time, your cooperation and possibly the past director who departed also, and try to understand the root cause of what's going on here with some solutions for it. Because there do seem to be some structural issues, and I've heard of anyway, too. So, again, on behalf of the board, we certainly thank you. We should have been longer, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you. And I really would stress, just as I go, that I really like your town, and I really like working with this board, and I really love the patrons that come in. My favorite time in the week is working the desk. I don't know too many public library directors that actually work the front desk to check out books, but I do it 25% of my time every week, and that's the best time to see the people, not just from here, all over. I mean, that's the biggest strength of our library, that we're taking people from East Hampton, from Westfield, from Holyoke, because they like what we offer here, and we're required to do that by the state. But that's a fantastic thing. So I really appreciate the enthusiasm you're bringing, because you do have a great resource, and I hope that other vested interests, other parties with vested interests from the town outside of the Board of Trustees become involved in seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion before the board, which needs to be seconded. If there's a second, okay, which is to invite the Library Board of Trustees, the departing director and the prior director as well, so to come and have a heart-to-heart, round-the-table talk about what may be going on at the library, which is causing us to not retain people or lose directors, and what is going on there, and also to suggest some possibilities for future structural reforms. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. All the way down. Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Still open time for the public. Just for the finance guys, honestly, I'm talking to Dave every day, so we will get some numbers for you too. So, yeah, we appreciate your position completely.
Thank you.
So, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Like I'm saying,
You are.
I'm just like to address the window problems that we're having. Right? I took the time last week, got a ladder, went up and inspected the windows.
Sure.
And to tell you the truth, they look pretty tight. And I checked quite a few of them. Also checked the roof, the way the roof curves up and how it's capped. And then the only reason I do it, I'm able to do this is my background, before work for a home company, I was a gardener. My own family gardeners. I built my own house. I built quite a few things. If we're going to pay $3,000 for a test on those windows, I might be able to do it for $3. I think there were two people, a ladder on the inside, and somebody outside with a garden hose to see if the water comes through. Now, these windows are not made to go on a submarine or whatever kind of ship. But looking the windows over, they look, fairly tight.
Okay, we certainly appreciate your offer. $3 is infinitely better than $3,000. My understanding of this test procedure is that at the last meeting we said, okay, we need to find out more about what the test actually entails and what the units are and how many different kinds of tests, and also what the test really involves, because as you know, there are tests that test to specifications, how many millibars, how many bars, how many whatever is PSI in this case, I'm assuming. So to the extent that we can find out these criteria for this test, we may actually be able to use you at that more reduced rate. But we first of all are in the process right now of finding out exactly what these tests mean.
One of the other things, forever shocks me in New England, it's flat roofs. That is a flat roof. I went there, and there's puddles.
Yeah.
Now suppose it's a sealed roof, right? But what does that say for it? It's something in the wintertime. For snow, we get ice buildup.
Right.
Second snow, we get ice buildup. Et cetera, et cetera. Now we got snow went above the windows. Where does the water go?
Right. Through the window. Or through the membrane, possibly.
Well, we're going to have a membrane. It comes up 16 inches. It's capped by a piece of metal. In certain parts, it's sealed. Other parts, we're able to take a credit card. All right? Push your credit card an inch and a half in. All right? The middle of the strip is only a half inch. How is it adhered or how it's tapped against the wall, I don't know. But you should be able to take a credit card, anything, and go in an inch and a half, an inch and a quarter.
Sure.
In quite a few different places.
Okay, we appreciate that information. So, best we can do, I think, at this point is to keep you informed as we talk with these various testing. What we wanted to do was to find a testing person or company that has nothing to do with the contractor or the windows, so entirely independent authority on testing, if there is one, and get a price from them. That's where we were. Is that right, Reggie?
Yes.
So that's where we are, but yeah, we really appreciate your perspective on it, too. There's a couple of some houses in town here, too, with flat roofs.
I realize that, why would you put a flat roof? Why would you put a flat roof anywhere? And, no, we've got a really terrific ceiling. But in time, eventually, it's going to leak. And I don't care what anybody says. This is New England. Anything that gets on that roof would have been, acceptable.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Any further public, open time? Mr. Bush, are you here for?
Yeah, Walter Bush. I submitted a packet to the board.
Right,
And obviously it's a time-sensitive issue.
right.
So I'm here to find out, I was called earlier during the week.
We had trouble finding your cell phone number yesterday, so the administrative assistant or interim town administrator sent you a letter as the best recourse in that. Did you get that at the time?
Actually, I was able to call.
You were able to call, okay, yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to review the packets that I provided?
We did, but we're not an opportunity to have an opinion on them, though, because we have to have that opinion delivered to us by outside counsel. I read through it, all 16 pages of it, I certainly did, and I appreciate the work that you put into it.
Okay. Well, all I want to say is, for the purposes of this year, put these packets together. I think it's fairly clear, just based on definition, that the legal definitions that I provided to the board, as well as the chief of police, are very clear. Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 131, clearly states that when you submit a license to carry firearms, clear statute that it has to be processed to the state police within 7 days along with a copy of fingerprints. I have a copy of that if you'd like to take a look at it.
No, I read through that, and I appreciate it.
The reason why I'm here tonight is because you are the appointing authority, and this individual works under the appointing authority. You will come into this position. He has a duty and responsibility to carry out the responsibilities of his job, one of those being issuing a license to carry firearms. The law clearly states that he has 40 days to respond. Now, I received a packet from him when he returned the entire application along with the check. Now, there is nowhere in the statute that provides for the chief returning an application. There's only 2 places in the statute, I think Mr. Phelan, where, as someone who works in the legal field, if you've had an opportunity to review the statute, you know that there's 2 fees that can be charged. One of those fees is for $100 for a civilian, and 2 is for, quote, a law enforcement official. I provided a copy of my credentials. I provided a copy of the definition of a federal law enforcement officer. I provided a copy of the web page. I provided statutes that reinforce the fact that I fall into that category. Now, there's no specific definition in Chapter 140, Section 131, that says it must be a police officer, it must be a correctional officer, it must be a court officer. It says a law enforcement official. The definition of law enforcement official is an individual who is tasked with the enforcement or prosecution of any of the criminal laws of the state or the U.S. This is not a matter of whether or not I am a qualified person. This is a matter of you trying to determine a fate. The burden of proof is on me to prove that I am that I was employed in the law enforcement field. So I'm coming to the board to say that this is an issue of an appointed official in town who's not carrying out one of his responsibilities. Now, the reason why I'm here is because I've been informed that in the hearing, you're looking to push the hearing back. This is a time-sensitive matter.
Right.
Unfortunately, the only person who, is going to not benefit from the delay is myself. So I'm here to ask the board tonight whether or not this is something that can be resolved in the town, or whether it's something that needs to go outside the town to court. I don't want to go that route. I'm looking to seek relief, one step at a time here, but I don't know what other avenue that I can pursue.
Sure. Okay, a couple of things. One is that Mr. Phelan, although he is an attorney licensed to practice before the bar of Massachusetts and Connecticut too, but is not empowered on this board to act in that capacity. That's one thing. Now, a couple of other things here too. One is that I've mentioned, though, is that we cannot sit here as a board and take, this is just generic, somebody coming through and saying one of your department heads is not doing his or her job, and then we are then therefore required to spring into instant action, because that's really not the way the process would work at all, because if that were happening, personal grudges would come in and there would be a whole lot of abuse, I think, of the select board as such. So what we decided to do was the third option, which you didn't mention, was for us to send your documentation to our outside counsel, our town council, for their opinion as to the validity of this, and that further gives us some talking points, if you will, as we talk to someone who reports to us. But we can't simply bow to everybody who comes in who has a disagreement with the department head.
Okay. I understand.
That's where we are.
Sir, I understand that completely. What I'm looking to do is I'm looking to seek relief prior to the expiration.
Right. I understand there's a 90-day period, though. Is that correct?
No, the way the law is written is it's very simple. If you submit your application prior to the expiration date, you're entitled to a 90-day grace period. The licensing authority has 40 days from the point that they receive the application to respond with either an approval and issue the license, or they are to deny it, and then, which opens the process for court review. By sending an application back, you're essentially stripping an individual of his, number one, the 90-day window for the approval or denial processing time period, and you're essentially letting the application expire, okay, when that is not the intent of the applicant. I'm submitting my application, which I have right here, which was returned to me, okay? It's postmarked, it's dated. It was submitted September 14th. Now we're on October 3rd.
Right.
I'm coming to the board to, at the very minimum, request, which I think is quite possible and quite a reasonable request, to ask that the board contact town council and express to town council the time-sensitive nature of this issue. Town council, essentially what you're asking them is, by definition, does this individual fall into this category?
I did that last week.
Yeah, and what was the response?
We're waiting to hear, but we will certainly hear before the 18th.
Okay, now, again, I wasn't aware of this, other than the fact that there was the meeting was going to be possibly pushed back to, I think, November 7th?
First.
Or 1st, okay. And I did, that was conveyed to me, that the meeting would potentially be pushed back to November 1st. I'm not looking for any unreasonable requests. I figured I would take it upon myself to come here to the public forum in order to express my concerns. And at this point, I think I've done that, and I don't think it's unreasonable to request that if the board, a member of the board can contact town council, indicate to them that this is a time-sensitive nature, and then I don't think it's unreasonable to maybe come up with an agreement of a time frame, which I could be notified, so that I can take whatever actions necessary from that point forward.
Right.
Is that fair?
What would be fair is for all of us to respect the fact that as a town, while we certainly have a reporting relationship, the department heads do report to us, we nonetheless do have certain general laws that we have to adhere to as well with respect to. In the event of someone coming in with a complaint against a department head, there is the process, if you will, where that department head has the right to come in and personally meet with the board in addition to the other person, so that we're not going on hearsay. So we absolutely are aware of the fact that there's a time sensitivity here, and we certainly have conveyed that already to town council. I can call them again tomorrow, but that's really what we have to do. We can't just veer away from that process.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. If court action is initiated, is at the end of this process, that's basically what I'm, if I initiate the court action, which...
That's a sole action on your part. We are
No,
simply looking...
what I'm saying is if I seek relief through the courts, is this process now terminated? What I mean by, am I going to come here on November 7th, or excuse me, 1st, and the board is going to say, well, it's come to our attention that you have petitioned the court to seek judicial relief. Therefore, now we're at a halt, we're at a standstill. So I guess what I'm trying to anticipate and forecast is what the board's position is going to be if I go in that direction.
Sure. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm not a legal authority. That's a very interesting question. If you did that, would that stall our independent consultation with our council?
And that's essentially what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take the steps that are necessary, which is coming to the board first, and then seeking relief elsewhere if necessary.
Right. We're not the if necessary yet. Though.
If I may, one of the things that wasn't in that packet that I provided each one of the board members is my coworkers, they all receive their license to carry at a $25 fee. So that's an important piece of material.
That wasn't there. Go ahead.
Walter, if I may?
Go ahead, you go first. Your age before beauty.
Don't you start.
If necessary, I can get the departments within the state that have issued those permits under the $25 fee. I can get that information provided to the board.
Sure. Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Walter, if I may, and before we start, this isn't an inquest or anything, this is informational.
Sure.
And I just want to bring this up. I called the Ethics Commission because Walter is related to my son-in-law has a sister that he is married to. I called the, it's far-fetched, but I'm not going to go to jail for making a decision when I shouldn't. And the Ethics Commission said that is not a direct relation, there's no problem. Can you act without bias in this thing? And I said, absolutely yes. I see him probably 3 times a year. So there's no problem with that. If I knew this was coming up tonight, I would have sent in my paperwork that I got from the Ethics Commission to the town clerk and to each one of you with due respect. So I'm just telling you verbally what's going on, okay? So in regard to your paperwork that come in, I read it, and everybody else did. Jesse immediately sent that to our town council. He sent everything in the packet as it was. You asked specific questions, they should be answered as specific answers. Not dancing around, yes, no, boom, boom, boom. That's it. When it comes back to my knowledge, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, we will have a meeting with you and Chief Silvernail. And he has the right to make this public or private meeting. Right, that's his right.
I don't think we can make it public at this point. I'm here tonight. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know if this is publicly broadcasted, but if it is,
No, that's all right.
It will be, it's being taped now.
Also, Reggie mentioned something to me today, because usually before we have a selectmen's meeting, all of the selectmen call her up and say, okay, what's going on tonight, because she's like the ringmaster. She is.
sure.
And so we kind of all get educated on what's going on so that we can run a decent meeting. Reggie, when you talked to town council today, what did they say about when they might get back to us in regard to a decision?
By the 18th.
By what?
By the 18th. They still wanted to talk to Chief Silvernail, and then they're going to put it in writing.
One of the questions, if I may, when you present the town council, the packet that I provided you, okay, I provided each one of you a copy of this packet. I have a feeling in forecasting what the chief's position is going to be on this is that he's going to indicate that the packet is incomplete in some way. So what I would pose to the board, and again, in this session today, I would actually request a copy of the tape. Okay? What I would pose to the board is, if you take this application, okay, everything considered equal, and you take another application with all documents that support this identical, and you write federal probation officer on this one, and you write police officer on this one, what is the difference that makes this one a complete packet and this one an incomplete packet, is all I want to know. So if he's going under the fact that it's incomplete because the fee is not there, then all we're arguing is whether or not it's an issue of finding the law enforcement officer.
Well, you covered those questions in all of your paperwork, as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
And Mike can't act as one, even though he is one, because he's a selectman, so that's why we sent it to town council. And they're going to answer the questions they should, exactly the way you presented them, given the information you gave them. So, and that's going to be by what, the 18th? And so we'll have after we get it,
If
we'll
not
have a meeting
sooner.
after that.
If not sooner.
Pardon?
If not sooner.
Okay, can I ask you this then? If by the 18th, now this issue has been brought to the board in its entirety, the 18th, is there a reason to switch the meeting?
Yeah, I'm not sure why I got switched to the first.
The reason why it got switched is because there was a request to have all 5 board members there.
That's
That
smart.
was-
That's right, my apologies, yes, because somebody couldn't be here in the interim, that's correct. Yeah.
What do you want, all 5 board members here, because that's representing the town. 5 people, not 4 or 3. And it's in everybody's best interest that 5 board members be here, and 1 board member will be gone the 15th till the 23rd. Okay?
Okay. So, of October. We survive usually, I understand. Okay. So essentially, there's no insurance for me to say that there's going to be, I mean, I'm not looking for a response tonight. You want me to push this off to November 1st. You can understand my concern.
Right, but you did bring
November
it,
1st gives me 26 days left to get to court to file the necessary paperwork if it gets to that point.
right. But you had said if necessary, so my honest suggestion would be to you to give us the time until then to see if your next step is indeed necessary or not. And that's really really the best that we can do, which I think is absolute town process in these matters.
Well, I think in that, just going back, and I'll close with this. If you would, please present to town council the issue I brought up with the application, which is everything considered equal, document for document. One says police officer, one says probation officer. What is the difference? What is truly the difference between a complete application? Because if the chief is going to say it's an incomplete application, should he choose to go that route, I would like to know in writing what else I can supply to make my application complete other than my title.
Well, may I make a suggestion?
Yep.
And you're very well versed in this. Would you mind putting what you just said in writing?
Absolutely.
And Jesse, could you please forward that to our council?
I'd be happy to do that, and further would like to ask that you also include the additional information that 6 of your co-workers were able to obtain the permits at the $25 rate, which you mentioned earlier in this
I
conversation.
don't know how many total, but I know that the people who work directly with me,
Yes.
I consulted with both of them, and both of them received it for $25.
Okay, so if you could include that as well in writing, and then we can forward that right on it directly.
I've also had an opportunity to consult with the individual who is, and I don't want to mention any particular name.
No, it's better.
But an individual who is an expert in the area, who actually trains municipal chiefs in the issuing of these, of firearms, what you need to do in the protocol that you need to follow. And I've consulted with the individual, and that individual indicates to me, as well as a couple other chiefs, that I am correct in my interpretation. So I don't think that we have to go that far and go to court if that's necessary, so be it, but I think at this point, it is what it is.
Okay. So we certainly appreciate all that you put into this, and again, that went out last week to town council. If you can get that others to us tomorrow, we'll go to town council.
Can I make a
I'm
suggestion?
interested in the information that,
We have a suggestion here.
Maybe possibly is to get a copy of the application that you submitted, so that can go to, we have that?
We have it already. Yeah. Yeah.
that was
That was in
The
that.
the package
That was
itself?
in that package.
Oh, it's, but the whole thing is in that
The
package.
whole thing is in that
Okay.
package. I have it. Yeah.
I have it in my briefcase.
Okay, good, well, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, you're certainly welcome, thanks. Okay. And the next item, we're still in open time for the public. A lot of public consultation and conversation this evening. Okay, none, approval of minutes, nothing at this time. Payroll warrant, do you want to read that off?
Yeah, we have a payroll warrant number P12-13 for $224,751.46.
So move to approve?
Second.
In favor? Aye. Okay, we have a bill warrant, would you mind reading it out?
We'll read that also. We have a bill warrant W12-14 for $217,087.09.
Motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, those are going around for signature. PCFs and PRFs and disability forms, library tamper was reviewed by Finance Committee.
I
They
guess
didn't
they
give us
must have
anything.
not. They must have not.
Okay, one-day licenses, nothing at this time. Okay, town owner agreements with Pioneer Valley Planning Commissioner and the, oh, here are a bunch of
No, that's
PCFs.
for,
Oh, okay.
Do we sign this one?
thing on the front is fine. So the first things are sure.
Okay, one-day licenses, nothing, PCFs, nothing, town owner agreements in signature folder.
Well, this key request is in your,
Oh, that was just to finish up the paper.
Okay.
With the report.
here's the Hilltown.
What committee was here? Okay. Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, you want Pioneer Valley?
Pioneer Valley.
Pioneer Valley. Here we go.
Owner.
You got them.
You had asked about those town owner agreements
Yep.
for an update, and in speaking with Kelvin Molina and Laura Foley, who are the administration folks, this is in regards to the housing rehab that you have been working with,
Right.
and it's really detailed, but...
This is a deferred payment loan that they would make, so we
Yes.
really have supervisory authority over this under the Community Development Office. On our behalf, they're making a deferred payment loan to the
Right.
owner of the property. So it doesn't, I believe the question was whether or not this cost us anything, was that right?
No, it was part of a grant, a $737,000 grant within the 5 communities, Southampton, Greenville, Montgomery, there's another one. So no, it doesn't.
Well, it was an invoice, and somebody said, who's going to pay the invoice? So, my understanding is the invoice...
Invoices are for us to authorize the folks, the administration folks, to get paid. They can't pay themselves, that's where the invoices are coming from.
Checks and
It's coming out of the grant, the $737,000.
Okay, we need a motion to approve, whether everyone agrees with that.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
There's another document in your signature folder called the Hilltown CDC, and they're asking for an extension. The reason why they're asking for an extension is many boards and committees were on vacation, and it put Paul Lucetti behind a little bit.
Motion to approve.
Oh, wait a minute, I don't, you're ahead of me. I have these agreements. And then I have
the PVPC, we still need to do that.
Southampton Community Development Program, Granville, Blanford, Montgomery.
Those are the invoices to pay the administration, which is Calvin Molina, Laura Foley, and Marie Brady, who are the administrators of the housing rehab. They do the research of making sure the applicants qualify.
This is an invoice for $4,061.75.
Right. So these are all related, Michael?
All right, so move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Then
That was
we-
the question that Reggie has answered.
And then we have another one for $5,909.62, which is, oh, that's the community development.
Sign this and Jack can sign this. Okay, moving along, then we have housing needs and signature folder, community development fund, right? Anvil Monument Park Committee meeting tonight, we'll bring in contract?
I have that right here.
Okay. Jacqueline will sign this, right? Okay, the American Pomeroy Historic Genealogical Association. And I quote, "Thank you for your letter giving permission to place a Pomeroy anvil, memorializing the Pomeroy family, etc. This agreement details our commitment to the town of Conant Memorial Park as regards to the monument installation and details the roles of all parties in carrying out this project. Gives the size, the spacing of it no closer than 25 feet from the northerly corner of the schoolhouse on that property. And Carla's Monument Company will carry out the appropriate care of the insurance and also will do the installation. And other tidbits in here. The town will obtain all permits required for the building of the foundation and installation of the monument. In addition, the town will obtain underground clearance prior to excavation of the foundation. The town will provide the APHGA, which is the American Pomeroy Historical Genealogical Association, written assurance that all necessary permits have been obtained. The town will further allow the Pomeroy and its assigned representatives of the contractors access to the property in order to dig the foundation and install the monument. We also will recommend qualified local contractors capable of building the foundation and installing the monument. We agree to maintain the monument and the area around the monument in a fashion that is attractive and presentable to the public, including occasional washing of the monument to remove debris. The town and the park agree not to move or alter the monument without prior written notification, and the town and Conant Memorial will organize a community-based dedication ceremony, agreeing to work together towards a spring installation and dedication in May of 2012. So this has been signed by William G. Pomeroy, who's president of the American Pomeroy Historical Genealogical Association, as well as having been signed by Mark Reed, chairman of the Park Commission, town of Southampton. And there are 2 copies for our execution.
Motion to approve.
Just if I may, during the discussion period, that we will obtain all permits required for the building of the foundation.
Maybe you have to pull a building permit.
Town does, or does it mean, don't we issue the permits, right?
I think you're talking about permit fees.
Oh, the fees in lieu of,
That's
instead of
correct,
charging
yes.
fees? Okay,
And that's normal with the town property.
Okay.
They usually waive the fees.
all right. Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded to approve the APHGA. Do you want your chair? Any further discussion?
You're the older one.
Well, yeah, I figured I got grandpa's
All in
chair.
favor, aye?
Yeah, we did, okay. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
I
Okay,
got grandpa's chair.
okay.
I may not give it up if you don't like, take it soon.
Hilltown contract extension, we did that, Rich?
Valley Vision is the next thing here.
There's one in Northampton I saw the other day, too. Okay, things to come. Okay, a Hilltown CDC, we did that, right?
We got a PVC Valley Vision update. I don't know where that is. It's not on your list.
Valley Vision update?
So it just doesn't actually require any signature. I think it's just an update.
Right.
Okay. It was in the signature.
It's on an action list, so that's coming up.
Oh, all right.
Okay. So moving down the line, we have conservation restriction on Howland on Brickyard Road. Charlie, I see you in the back there. Yeah, that's right. No, it was a town meeting. So Charlie, actually, our collective memories did finally swing into gear. We did remember this was something that was done at town meeting. It was voted on, it was presented. It wasn't brought through here, but it was brought directly to town meeting.
Yes, I'm approaching the board to sign, hopefully this evening, conservation restriction for the Howland property. This is 9 acres off of Brickyard, adjacent to Parsons Memorial Forest, and also adjacent to Hazel Young. So it would...
Pick up a little bit, so
it will expand it by 9 acres. We will have to pay $13,500. That's an assessed value. The basic document is very similar to what was written for the Searle property, the conservation restriction at Wolf Hill. I modified it. It has passed through Kathy Klein of Copeland and Page, and also through the Office of Conservation Services in Boston. So they have reviewed it. The only specifics that have been introduced, and it's related to one of the reasons we wanted to go after this property, was a certain statement in here about that bridge. If you remember going from Parsons, I should say Hazel Young to Parsons, there is a suspension bridge that I think the Boy Scouts put in some decades ago. It's right at the confluence of Moose Brook and the Manhan, and it is in dilapidated condition right now. And repairing it, it could be either repaired or replaced, and there's language in this restriction that enables us to put it there where it is presently located, or move it to another location, perhaps at the Howland property. So, based on interacting with Kathy Klein and also this Office of Conservation and Recreation, Conservation Services, I should say, we have both the conservation restriction, and we also have a management agreement. And the Conservation Commission approved these last night, and they have to be approved by the Select Board, so that's why I'm here. Eventually, when everything gets finished, we will put a new sign up, such as it's mimicking the signs that we have replaced at Brickyard and also at the Zipter Farm. And it reads, "The Manhan Meadows Sanctuary, conservation restriction granted by the Howland family, managed by the Conservation Commission with the support of the Community Preservation Committee," and then we have it titled Howland Conservation Area.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And again, just to remind the board, this was approved by a 2/3 majority at town meeting.
Move to sign the agreement.
Second.
Right, okay, any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Charlie, for shepherding us through the process.
Okay.
The Howland family has been here for at least 11 generations. Been here a lot.
I have one other issue to introduce, if I may, maybe ad hoc for the commission. Juliet Locke, a member of the commission for 3 years, because of professional and family responsibility, is going to resign at the end of this month from the Conservation Commission. So we will be down one person. And Mala Hank has been dutifully coming to our meetings for the last 4 years, literally every meeting. And she sent me and we discussed this last night at a regular meeting. And she sent me this email: "Hi Charlie, if it is agreeable with the other SCC members and the select board members, I would like to return to the SCC as a full member." She has been an associate member for these 4 years. As you know, I have continued taking Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commission courses for the last 3.5 years. Please let me know what I need to do to become a commissioner again. And I wrote this afternoon. Through the Select Board, the Conservation Commission would unanimously support Mala Hank as a full member of the Commission. She is presently an associate member. She has really missed attending our meetings over the last 4 years and has participated with knowledgeable...
Mrs. Laflamme, we're conducting a meeting here. Could you please bring that outside?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
She is presently an associate member. She has really missed attending our meetings over the last 4 years and has participated with knowledgeable comments in our discussion. Her term would begin on November 1st, 2011. So I wrote these letters up. I wrote that letter up with her, and if we need to do more, would appreciate being informed exactly what that might be.
Okay. The presumption is, have you met then as a committee to approve her request, or?
I think last night it was discussed. It wasn't, we didn't have a phone.
Yeah, she was at our meeting.
Yeah, and
Sort of discussion went.
Not that but in proper form of things, I think it requires an open posting.
Okay.
Just to avoid any problems.
Okay, that's fine. We can do that and then submit it again to you? Yeah. All right.
You'll be overwhelmed with applicants.
I'm sorry?
You'll be overwhelmed with applications for the position.
Oh, I know. That's what we were worried about.
That's all.
It has to be notarized?
Oh, this needs to be notarized.
How long needs to be notarized?
That's right.
Is Eileen gone?
He's gone.
Would tomorrow be all right for that?
Sure? Yeah.
But,
You can do it.
oh, can we can write it out, though. We can write that we've signed this subsequent notarization.
She witnesses the signature right there.
The thing you can do.
It's true.
Do you only have one of these? You don't have a blank?
Yes.
You don't have a blank one?
I don't have a blank one.
Take it, white out my signature, and I'll notarize everybody else's signature.
Good workaround. Okay.
All right.
Moving on then. Thank you, Charlie, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Charlie.
Bob. Okay.
Good night.
Thank you.
Snag where if I can.
Yeah.
And then I'll leave you to your devices.
Yep. We'll keep some others here. Okay. All right. So that brings us then to letters of interest for Greenway. We have the upcoming events and meetings. And don't forget, we have, of course, the November 1st is the grand opening. It's coming up, obviously, in less than a month. Meeting will begin at 7 p.m. because of the ceremonies and festivities prior. Okay. And then, under action list, we need to review letters of interest for Greenway, which has been postponed due to, there was a delay in posting the vacancy, so now the last day is October 18th to submit letters of interest for that Greenway committee. Then we have the Valley Vision Mutual Agreement. Okay.
Is that it?
Please have the board chair sign this extension. Who said that? This extension will provide Hilltown CDC Community Development Corporation with additional 2 months to complete work, with an additional extension beyond that is possible. So it's a contract amendment by mutual agreement, and it has to do with, it's by and between the town of Southampton and the Hilltown Community Development Corporation. And this is an amendment to extend the contract expiration date to December 31st, 2011. All other terms of the original contract shall remain in full force and effect.
What kind of contract is
This is the Community Development Fund Program. It's a housing market study and housing development site.
it? Market study.
I think so too, but I don't know, September 25th.
So that's the only thing they're doing, so it is, any discussion?
Asking for an extension.
Move to sign.
Second.
And I can read the contract as being amended if you wanted, 20 pages, but,
Summarize.
okay. All right, so the motion's been made and seconded then to sign this extension of the agreement by and between Town of Southampton and the Hilltown Community Development. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And there's a true signature attest here, so Michael, how do we navigate that? Because that's a witness, right?
Yeah, that's just a witness. Anybody, you sign it, anybody can
Can
sign it.
Ann be my witness?
And Ian could be your witness.
As Ann is my witness? Okay, so then moving on down, I have several to sign here, so I'll do those. So, do you want to take over the Charter Communication? We did that already.
We did what?
There's a letter from Bill Huey, by the way, in here, in our handouts.
Oh,
He did not address 13.6.
so, yeah.
Okay.
So that's, I would stick with,
The letter from Mr. Hewig is actually a summary of, I believe, everything that you have touched on
Right.
and talked about in the past.
Right, I just wanted you to be aware of that it's in
yeah,
the...
but I went looking through that, and it doesn't make any mention as to that,
Correct, I didn't see any mention of
drop.
that. Right.
About the what?
The drop in the receiver, the transmitter receiver, the $6,000 to $8,000 transfer fee. Okay, so then we have timber cutting plans review.
Nothing at this time, so.
Okay, new town hall updates. Reggie, do you have anything?
Yes, S&E was in today, and they were looking at they were doing a service, an annual service to check the boilers, and they checked the hot water status, and this is all beyond my technical, I'm not familiar with the plumbing codes, but it has something to do with the mixing valve that is installed on one of the pipes. So he is going to come back tomorrow and move it to a different location, which should fix the hot water situation.
Great, all right.
The other thing, the reason why the computer was registering the water tank at 140 and they were reading it at 110, 120 is because when we lost power, it fried the computer brain downstairs in the boiler room. So he took that computer back to his place. They're going to rebuild it and then bring the new one back to us under a 3-year warranty.
Oh, great, thank you. That's news. Good news. Okay.
Another update, I'm sorry. Another update, yes, in regards to the kitchen. Belanders will send their contract to us tomorrow. They tried to get it sooner, but they're busy. The contract that they're going to send involves installing everything that's there as is, and then they're going to send a separate quote for the hand washing sink, which is going to be located next to the dishwasher.
Good. Built into the counter? Great.
All right.
Only 2 years to get to that point.
And then one other small item, actually, I was in the senior center yesterday. They were actually open and giving flu shots, injections, so it had some functioning going on. I was in last week also, the assistant director was in the office working in there. Someone needs to let Southampton News know that the senior center is occupied. And additionally, I talked to Jennifer yesterday, and she said there was one minor little glitch, which is that the lock on the bathroom door wasn't functioning. So I asked Reggie to have Florence Lock and Key come in and fix it.
And on that note, that's where I have the key request. The key update, keys inventory update. They actually requested, Senior Center COA, Jennifer Pellecoin, requested 2 additional keys. One is for the Senior Center master key and one is for the Senior Center common key, because if we allow groups to use the Senior Center, we're only going to let them have the common key, which does not let them go into the office or the closets.
Right, so you do need to have a lockout of the
Yes.
office. If the Girl Scouts are using it, for example?
Actually, they're not. They are
They
going...
could have.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
But they don't have any keys now, right?
They do, but they have 3 staff members, so they need additional keys. And one, the senior center common key will be left at dispatch for the folks who use the room. And that's something that I'm working on with them in regards to the building use policy.
So do they see, does the group seem satisfied or happy with their place? Can you tell?
I think so.
Still working on the kitchen?
Yes.
Have you started unloading that trailer out there?
No.
I asked Ed to do that, and he is going to get to it, but I haven't seen any action yet.
I just wondered. All their stuff is in there, I think, or most of it.
We all set with all that stuff? You need any bolts or anything?
We gotta decide about these
Yes.
keys. The question becomes, is the same thing that happened over in the other town halls. We hand out these keys and dribbles and grabs, and sooner or later they become a flood. You know, I mean,
How are we going to control that situation now?
If you
I don't
look
know how you
at
do
it,
it.
everybody has a front door key, to be honest with you.
yeah, no, I mean, it just slips away from us.
We don't. We're pretty smart.
I know, we don't. But it just slips away from us. One person gets one, and you keep adding to it. I mean, so we're back to the point, we probably have no clue how many keys are out there.
Actually, the missing keys are, it's one control key, one custodial key, one front door key, and one select board office key. Those are missing.
So we're missing
Unaccountable for.
control key. What does a control key do?
That has to take out the cylinder when you,
Oh, great, so anybody can pop a cylinder. And a custodial key, I would assume, gets them into most of the building.
it doesn't.
No? Front door key gets you at least in the building. A select board key gets you nothing but a cup of coffee if you have
So which
$3.
select board member has lost their key?
I don't know.
we never had
The
one.
whole
Yeah.
question is who received it.
We never had one.
I think David McDougal did at one point in time.
Oh,
Last?
because I refused when
Yes.
I was chairman, I refused.
Me too.
I didn't want the responsibility.
But I think it's a good idea to partition off in the way that the Council on Aging is asking. That seems to me to be, Michael, even though it's an extra key, it's a positive.
Oh, no, I mean, that's the way it was set up, but I'm just saying the more times we hand out, the more people gain access. Remember when we woke up over there and couldn't figure out who had a key? In fact, everybody in town had a key but us, to the other town hall,
When the files were missing.
and the files were missing.
Isn't there an alarm on the building?
No. And that's another, I was here last night, I forgot that there was a training, and I just happened to look out the window, and there was a gentleman from the fire department, I don't know who it was, I didn't recognize him, who unlocked the Knox box, which is located outside the door, grabbed the master key, opened up the front door, put the key back in, locked the Knox box, and came in and
Which
opened
means
up.
the fire chief gave them the Knox-Box key, because they're the only one who's
And I
supposed to.
thought that was just for emergencies, that's, sorry.
I would imagine more than one person on the fire department should have the Knox box key.
Well, they're supposed to be on a master ring that they carry with, I mean, yeah, maybe there is more than one, but they're supposed to be for emergencies only,
Yeah, well,
you know?
Jackie?
Why is there not an alarm on this building? We've invested millions of dollars in it.
Because we ran out of millions of dollars.
We ran out of
We
money.
ran out of
But
money.
if somebody comes in here and does some damage, we don't have the money to fix it.
That's some insurance.
Oh. Maybe we should look into that, do you think? An alarm system?
I can reach out to a couple, I can do that.
But just at least the door.
Mhm.
I know. Did anybody put that little doorbell on?
Not yet.
Did you tell them about that?
I don't think so.
what is that, battery operated thing? Or?
Yeah, it's wireless. It's actually a little battery inside of it. But
Yeah.
what happened was I was leaving one day, Gary was out there with Eileen, and they were talking about how this handicapped person couldn't get in the door. That they were out there knocking and nobody could hear them. So they're just sitting there for God knows how long.
Right.
So Gary had said, well, maybe we should just get a doorbell, wireless, and just get the intercom, the speaker in one of the offices, so that this person could press that button and be let in. So I was going to the Home Depot and I bought a little $30 item, and somebody has to put that little doorbell up, and then one of the offices has to put that speaker in there. Maybe a town assessor, somebody's there that's all the time, so that person doesn't just sit there and not get in the building. because they don't have an ADA door.
Yeah.
Where is that bell now?
I gave it to, well, you know.
It's sitting on a filing cabinet right now.
So it's wireless?
Right. And you, what you do is you put the little doorbell low enough so the person in the handicap, they can press the button and somebody will hear and they'll come out and open the door for that person.
Where do you want to put the audible thing?
Well, that's the thing, we have to discuss that. We have to find an office that is there all the time, you know, so that they hear that, so somebody won't open the door.
Good point. That would fit into building use policy too, which you talked about earlier, so I don't think this board, because we're in charge of the building, so we ought to come up with a location.
Tell me what office you want to put it in, because Blanchard and Daly guys are going to come in here and do some electrical work, the, you know, donation work, whatever you want to call it. You tell me where you want the audible thing to go, and we'll put it there.
It's wireless, isn't it? It's just got
It's wireless.
just plopped.
I mean, for now,
It just has to get put down. No wires. It's
We're
wireless.
going to have to secure it somewhere, right?
I think it just plops.
Because if you just plop it down, somebody's going to kick it, or somebody's going to take it.
well,
or-
it's, well, the little thing's a doorbell that's outside it, and it must be.
The doorbell that you got.
Waterproof, I don't know how it attaches, but the inside thing, you could hang it, you could put it up. It's a little, Doug, it's a little, you know. speaker
Move to allow Douglas's place to put it wherever they deem appropriate.
Well, no matter where we put it, somebody's going to
I'm going to object, so I mean, put it wherever you want.
Don't say that.
Somebody's willing to
Now,
get up and
you
open
know,
the door.
the question-
I mean, why, we're debating this issue. No place is going to be right. Just put it somewhere and be done with it. Let's not spend the night talking about something that there's no right answer to.
Okay, moving on then, that was the last item. Right,
Well, Blanchard and Daly, I got a motion to have Blanchard and Daly install it.
okay, do we have a second?
Second.
In favor? Aye.
We still haven't dealt with this key issue.
I'm against it. No. Can I ask you something, please? On a grand opening?
Yeah?
Did I pitch out of it?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to have a grand opening here, and I think as a select board, we should request Reggie to secure a way to get funds, not a lot of funds, maybe $40 or $50, to take we'll buy some coffee and something down at Costco or something like that, or whatever, just very light stuff. And we'll use the big coffee pot from the Council of the Aging. We'll pour a big pot of coffee out there, some coffee made, sugar, da-da-da. When the people come in, they can have like coffee and crumpets. No, but you know, just like a little something.
Yeah, I think
And that should not come out of the select board, our pockets. It should come out of the towns, because it is for the town.
And David approved it. David Kielsen said it's a town function, so yes, it could come out of
Yeah.
What line is he going to take it from? He just, I mean, I can see easier taking it from our expense line and authorizing.
You know, whatever. You should be able to do it for under $50.
Well, obvious sport and authorize Reggie to spend $100 on the open house out of the selectmen's expense account.
Was that a motion, sir?
That's a motion.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to authorize the expense of $100. Those in favor? Aye. Over to you, okay, all we have to do is approve and then we can...
Yeah, coming back to the keys. First question is, are we going to authorize the 2 keys for the senior center? I move to...
I move to authorize the
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded to authorize the key change as requested by the Council on Aging, which would effectively lock the Council on Aging office during other use of that room.
Yes.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye. Okay, coming back to the missing keys, what are we going to do about those?
We should ask people to return them. I don't know.
Have you looked around for
I
them?
don't know who it was given to. I'm picking up the file and picking up the loose ends, so I don't know. I don't know where it
I would ask that Reggie do some sort of investigation, canvass the building to see if we can find those missing keys.
Okay. One other request was, and like I said, all employees have front door keys excluding Ruth Bernier. Ruth Bernier is the assistant town clerk.
Move to give, if everybody else has got one, how can you say no to Ruth?
The goose is out of the garage or something. Is that how it goes?
No, don't
Okay,
sign it.
no.
Oh, you got something, we got a motion to give Ruth her key.
Right, motion's been made to give Ruth Bernier, assistant town clerk, the key. Do we have a second over here?
Second.
Okay, in favor? Aye. Okay, so this is key issue request. Okay, so I sign here, blue. Joseph Muse. We didn't. This is Joseph Muse, original main door key, so.
Oh, is that just a stack of them?
Reggie, this is a stack of key requests? Are these?
Yes, those have not been signed by you. So everything that you're signing is reported in this report.
Okay.
Oh, we refuse to sign those, I think. Those are the ones we refuse.
So are we still refusing to sign them?
Yeah, I mean, the only request we have tonight is the Council on Aging, right?
And Ruth Bernier.
And Ruth Green.
So
Those folks have already have their keys. Those forms that you're looking at right now, those folks have the keys.
Okay. So I don't see anything here for Ruth to sign, that we sign.
I wanted your approval first.
Okay, all right. Okay. There's that, and then there's...
The grand opening, is everybody okay with the grand opening flyer?
You know, I was just thinking, does the school still have a chorus group or something up there? A chorus group or a little band group up there? I would say we ask them to...
Yeah, we could ask Bill Collins if he could bring these people down.
Bring the band down, or the choral group, or whatever, and have them...
When we did, that was the Hampshire Regional Marching Band came in at Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Remember inside, because it was a rainy day?
Marching band?
It was audible, you could hear them. I was just thinking maybe they have a subsection, just the percussion or something.
I'm sorry, just chuckling over here, I was just thinking about the song they could sing. Like something like, Hallelujah, it's finally time.
Hallelujah, it'll never be done.
It's almost done.
I'll tell you what we should do, in my opinion, since we're all stating it, except for Ann, of course, but you will in a minute. I think we should go down to the John Boyle O'Reilly Club and hire the bagpipe band and bring them here. That would be the best.
That would be the best.
Really?
That would be.
And get us beer. Yeah. That's what I would do. And I'd give a sizable contribution to that.
All right.
That's my motion. No.
All right, good. So prior to closing then, we do have actually one other item too, is that we had appointed Reggie as interim town administrator for a 12-week period. And that period actually ends in October, the 18th, and our next meeting is the 14th. The 14th is when their period ends, and then it's the 18th. So we need to also, as a board, consider what we're going to do about this, and that's one of the things that we've had sort of on the back burner while we went through all the other things that happened, and then what happens is, you know, there's always a lot of other things, so we do need to keep moving on this. We have, it's partly my delinquency in this too, is not getting with Reggie about the different job descriptions, but we will certainly do that in these next 2 weeks. And go from there and present something to the board for our approval for the next meeting.
When's the next meeting, before or after that?
So you are, Reggie, your dates are 14th is the meeting.
The next meeting is the 18th, and then the next one is the 1st, November 1st, which is the grand opening.
And hers will expire. So I'll move to reappoint Reggie for the next 12 weeks.
I'll second it.
Interim administrator.
That's seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. Those in favor? Aye. You're on. And further, you and I do need to get together though, with respect to the more, whatever, permanent next steps with respect to
But,
these
excuse
positions.
me, shouldn't that, rather than it coming from just one person, shouldn't we get a committee together to discuss that rather than, you know, because it seems to me that Reggie has so many things to do and is so busy that if we get a committee together and decide what the requirements should be, then, you know, we could discuss it as a group rather than one person just going in there to tell her or to, you know, distract her from her work, her everyday work.
Right. Now, this is not that at all. This is actually to go in and, in a formal interview sort of way, I had agreed, because this is what I do for a living, is I help people in their jobs, was I had volunteered to go in and find out what the positions required. Then I was going to bring that back to the board to discuss how can we best apportion these duties. So we just needed to list these duties, because jobs tend to evolve as people are in their jobs over time, so that's why we wanted to move away from the original town administrator position and see what's still there. So for example, Reggie works on the heating, the computer that controls the heating HVAC, which we didn't have in the old description. Things like that. So that's all we're planning on doing. Absolutely, we need to do that. It's a lot of folks in town have expressed interest in talking about this position too.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Have everybody talk about it rather than, you know.
Jackie, I'm sorry, you finished?
Yep, okay.
I didn't mean to cut you short, I'm sorry. Okay. Since I couldn't hear you that well because the acoustics in here stink. By the way, when are we going to put those things up?
When are we going to get a smaller table? 'Cause
We voted to not spend the money on the table a couple of months ago. We could still reconsider that, but the other thing about getting these up, we need to get somebody who can install them, yeah.
And we need to get that map up and the seal up, and we need to do all.
Okay, so we're going to have somebody with some time get the acoustics up. We do have the acoustics, do we not?
Do we know how to, what's to do to install them?
They hang like pictures.
So
This
can we ask,
The highway, we've
The
been
highway.
asking.
I mean, they don't do
They've
anything
been-
all day. What the
They've
hell?
been busy. They've been busy.
I understand they've been busy, but can we ask them to put them up?
Priority, okay.
Not a priority, you know,
Is it something that, I'll just do it on a Friday?
whatever, but don't kill yourself.
I'm okay on ladders too, I can come down.
Let the highway department do it.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do that, Reggie.
But anyways, okay, so we're going to try to get that done, the acoustics. One thing I wanted to, I honestly couldn't hear Jackie, everything she said. I apologize, that's life. Now that we're coming into another term for Reggie, 14 weeks? 12, whatever. Should we all kind of score her, get something? And in that way, because she's got to have a road where she's expected to go, what she's expected to do from everyone here. And if we don't give her our guidance, what we expect from her, then how can she perform?
What about bringing back the scorings that we used for Diana, that simple chart that we filled out?
My suggestion would be, again, this is my line of work too, is what are we asking her to do? We need to understand, as Jackie brought up first, what are we asking, what does the position ask anybody to do? And then any performance evaluations need to be against that.
So shouldn't we evaluate not what's in the future, but evaluate the past performance of the past 12 weeks, I think is what you're asking for.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely, that will be a subjective evaluation, or qualitative as opposed to quantitative in some way on evaluations, which is very, very important as well. But I think it's a great idea.
So why can't we just fan out the forms again like we did the last time when we scored them anonymously and handed them in?
I'll put them in your inbox.
Could you please do that? I think it's important. because
Yeah, I
she's
agree.
got to have some
Great
guidance
idea,
for us.
absolutely.
We're the ones that she's got to answer to.
Yeah.
And how can she doesn't know where she's going, and what?
But we need to know where we're asking her to go. So there's two different things here. One is called the more formalized job description, what we call a competency model. What are you going to do? And then the other is, again, this, I think you're absolutely right, the subjective impressions to date. Any sort of
I have a
subjective.
different way of putting it, but it's the same thing.
Right.
But my concern is that she's really doing two jobs now. It's very unclear, she doesn't have a straight line. Town administrator, it's a town administrator and her prior job. So how are we going to evaluate that? I think at this point, it seems like it'd be very difficult for her to have been able to keep up and be standing this long and saying something for her courage and bravery, but
We're not evaluating against those definitive criteria, rather against subjective.
It's historical. The evaluation right now is historical, nothing else. How's her
I
performance?
mean, since Diana left?
Yeah. The first 12 weeks are up.
Well, I would ask Reggie, do you feel like you're ready to have an evaluation?
Absolutely. I would like to know where I'm at, absolutely. Or what you feel and think.
Excuse me, did you get a chance to get some extra volunteer help?
I did.
Oh, good.
She starts next week.
Wonderful.
Rosemary Stone.
Oh, really?
I'm sorry.
Rosemary Stone? Huh.
All right.
And
Good
she will
job.
be doing,
Filing.
How about minutes?
for you all.
I do have them, but they're just not nice.
That's
I know, that's key.
That's what we need to get, is the minutes.
My position has been for quite some time that the best use of Reggie's time would be other than doing the minutes, the transcription.
No, I understand that, but the minutes are where
It's
we're going
illegal.
to, that's a legal requirement.
Legal requirement we have to do, but nonetheless, there are transcribers out there who do those things, and we're also looking at alternative technologies, and we occasionally spend some time doing that to try to figure out how we can comply with the law and not spend, 3 or 4 hours.
Well, you can hire somebody and take our tapes, and they can run a tape and do minutes off the tape.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking into that as well, bring that before the board.
Or, if you don't mind, may I just suggest, I'm pushing the laptop thing, Mike. I sit here with the laptop, and as we're all, I can type as we go, and there's your minutes produced.
You're going to drag me kicking and screaming into the 21st century, aren't you?
Wonderful. So if we had just one
That is the
laptop
most
to start, you
efficient
could do
way
that?
to do
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
Oh, then one laptop, I don't have, one laptop,
But
I don't
I
have a
would
problem.
love for all of you
Change
as
in the law,
well.
one laptop at a time, though. If you get one for you and everybody sees how important it is, right? Then you do one.
So we
and
just
one.
have to solicit some bids for it.
Actually, I have been seeking quotes. I have been, for all of you as well. It's better to get a bulk price.
Later, my ego, I was going to give you your motion, but once you put me in that mix, I was just lost all the steam.
And even go one step further, I would love to utilize this projector so the folks who are sitting in the audience, when you're looking at the agendas, they can see what you are looking at.
You want to get an idea of the price of this?
Absolutely, I completely agree. I can't make motions, but you all
I'll
can.
make a motion that we get a price on one computer for Reggie to see what it looks like, and then possibly 5 others, so that we will no longer be printing up these massive
Would that
things.
include, we have a projector.
I was just gonna say, Doug doesn't
So
want.
you can stream from that laptop to
We'll have to sit
that.
behind her and watch what she does.
Okay, the motion's been made, is it seconded? Those in favor? Aye. How about a motion to adjourn?
Against?
Doug, I'll teach you to do that.
Again.
You'll have to teach 2 of us.